What's going on, guys? Listening to records is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a fun escape. It's a way to kind of dive into someone's music and learn more about who the artist is, learn more about yourself, potentially. It's supposed to be an exploratory experience that brings you joy. And with vinyl, occasionally, there are aspects of it that can be stressful. The hobby of collecting vinyl is not for people that are really anal retentive. People that are very particular about every little thing are going to find issues to nitpick about collecting and listening to records. I want to talk about in this video a few things that we as vinyl fans just have to deal with. And it's unfortunate, especially as quality control gets worse and worse as years go on, with the demand for records rising year after year. So there are some things that I'm going to tell you, as someone who's been in this hobby for a while, that you just need to kind of let go and let happen, and try to appreciate the music more than finding perfection in an inherently imperfect medium. I'd really appreciate it if you guys would give this video a like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, it's free, it's easy to do, and it really helps support the channel. So the first two have to do with packaging. The first issue is corner dings. You know, you get a record in the mail and occasionally maybe it wasn't packed 100% properly and the corner wasn't protected. Maybe the USPS treated it like a football and were kicking it around the warehouse. Who knows? They're pretty crazy with the packages. But that being said, occasionally you'll get your record, you'll pull it out, and on the corner there'll be a little ding. A little something or other that's a crushed corner or a little tiny micro abrasion. Honestly, it just happens. A perfect jacket without any kind of damage is pretty rare these days, and to find one that has just a tiny little nicked corner, you just gotta deal with it, unfortunately. It is not worth going back to the label and asking for a replacement. It just bogs up the timeline even more. You just have to realize that you're probably gonna get a jacket that's not perfect, but it's good enough. Now, if you have a corner that's completely crushed or a giant crease, that's different, and that's something that shouldn't be there. I know it's annoying, but it happens so frequently now that with all the people that are requesting replacements, you're either going to be disappointed when they don't have one, or you're just going to be hurting the label, which oftentimes it isn't even their fault. Another thing in that same vein is a proto-split, as I like to call it. Occasionally, if you get a record, inside the jacket, if it has some room to move based on the packaging, it can split the top and or bottom of the jacket with a little white mark that sometimes, in a bad case, the record can actually pop through, which is awful. But occasionally you'll see just a little tiny white squiggle at the top or the bottom of the jacket, which means the jacket was starting to split but didn't actually break through. I call those proto-splits. They're annoying, they're not visually appealing, but they happen. And they're things that we just kind of gotta deal with. Again, not worthy of a replacement. If it has a giant split where it's the whole top and it's like 2 inches long, which I've had plenty of, that is worthy of a replacement. But you really gotta weigh these things and be like, is this just a minor inconvenience or is this a significant damage to the jacket? Next, I feel like I can do a whole video on this, but I'm gonna touch on it right now. A slight warp is not the end of the world. I'm coming to realize in the past few years that when I get a record that's completely flat, it is a unicorn. It is almost impossible these days to get a record that doesn't have the slightest motion as it spins, a little wave. It just happens. I don't know if it's a combination of improper packaging or being stored too tightly, or I can't even say what the specific cause for these slight warps are. Maybe they weren't fully cooled when they were put into the jacket from the plant. There's a million places it could have gone slightly wrong, but a slight warp, one that's just a little visual and doesn't affect the sound, you just have to deal with it. And I know that's frustrating. I know you order a record, you're like, it needs to be perfect. I paid for a perfect thing. I paid for a completely flat record. In your head, you're justified in feeling that way. But it's just not the case in 2021. There are so many records that have these tiny warps that don't affect the play at all. All it affects is when you're staring at it while it's spinning, which you don't really have to do. And you see it kind of wave a little bit as it goes around, just a little hump. That is unfortunate. It drives me a little crazy, but I've started to come to grips with it, and honestly, the sound is the most important part. If it sounds good, if your needle tracks it perfectly, if it doesn't jump off, you're fine. It still plays the music. The only time you should be returning a warped record is if it doesn't make connection with the platter at all and it's a giant wave when it goes around. That's bad. Also, if you're listening to it and your needle's jumping off the record, that's not good either. If you're listening to it and it sounds off, maybe the pitch is off, that's too warped, and that's when you request a replacement. And then moving on to something a little more holistic, slight surface noise, light pops and cracks. Guys, vinyl is not digital. When you're listening to a record, it's not scrubbed of the imperfections the way that digital music is. There are inherently going to be light clicks, light pops, possibly light noise between the tracks. It's just part of the medium. And yes, I do have some records that are dead silent from the second you drop the needle all the way through outside of the amazing music, but that is very few and far between as well. Lots of records, despite cleaning it, wet or dry, will have some noises. That's just part of the medium. And there are lots of people that say, I love vinyl because I love the pops and clicks. And ultimately, if you love that, that's great, but that is not what it's supposed to sound like. It's not supposed to have lots of pops and clicks. That's not a characteristic of the medium that makes people love it. But it is a necessary evil. And most albums, even if you clean them, are going to have the occasional light pop, the occasional crackle. It's just the kind of thing that comes with the territory. Now, if you get a record that is extremely noisy, where it's almost overpowering the music, or if you hear loud machine gun pops or like a really loud pop, that's a problem, and that requires you to possibly reach out to see if you need a replacement, or to look into it and see if maybe the actual record had an issue across the board and it's just a pressing issue rather than your individual copy. All I'm saying is, we need to kind of appreciate the music, and if the sound is distracting enough on a genuine level that it distracts you from the music, that's a problem. But if you hear the occasional light noise in your music, that's just vinyl, baby. Also, something that's worth mentioning is delayed shipping. When I pre-order a record, which, as you guys know, is pretty frequently these days, I expect it to get delayed. I expect that I'm not going to see it for a couple weeks or months after the official day that they announce that it will be released. It's just the way that the industry is working right now. The plants are extremely backed up. They're overrun with orders. Vinyl's at an all-time high, and there aren't enough plants to justify the demand. So everything is getting delayed. The records on my label are getting delayed. Things are just getting delayed in general, and if you're expecting a record on a specific day, you can't really hold a label to that. Now, that being said, if a label is waiting months and months and months, and it's just going over and over again with these delays and they're not communicating, that's different. You have to hold labels accountable for not being transparent. But if a label's being honest with you and saying, listen, there's manufacturing delays that are completely beyond our control, it's just part of the territory. This is something that we have to deal with as vinyl fans, and it sucks, but there's other records you can get. Go to your local store, grab a different record, play a record you own. There are ways around it, and I know you might be excited to get the record that you're waiting on, but when it eventually does arrive, it's going to be that much sweeter. The last thing I want to talk about, which is actually going to probably be worthy of its own video in a few weeks, is the existence of record flippers. Just like any hobby that has monetary value associated with it, there are going to be people that sell records for inflated prices. I don't approve of people that go and just flip records like blatantly. I don't think that's a good thing, and I do have more thoughts on it that I said will be worthy of its own video because it is kind of a gray area, and I'll get into that later. But I will say this, it's just not worth your energy. It's going to exist. There's nothing you can do to curb it. As long as there's money to be made, people will find ways to make it ethically or unethically, and that's just the way the world works. You just have to come at it with the understanding that there are some records that you're just not going to be awake for. You're going to miss the drop. And yes, maybe flippers helped it sell out, but not entirely usually. There's lots of people that were just there, right place, right time, and that is kind of the way the hobby works, and you get some and you miss some, and it's just this endless cycle. You should just focus on trying to track down the next record you're trying to get and being ready for the drop. That's the bare minimum I'll say about that. I do have a lot more thoughts on the whole flipping culture. I think there are some things that people aren't saying about flippers that I think are worthy of talking about, so hopefully I'll do a video about that in the coming weeks. But for now, I just wanted to share these kind of vinyl pet peeves, things that we just have to deal with that are annoying about collecting records, but also things that just kind of make the hobby what they are. If you have thoughts about anything that I've talked about, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, or if I forgot anything that are just kind of annoying things we have to deal with as record collectors, and I'd love to talk to you about the things that I selected. So I'll look forward to talking to you in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. More videos coming soon. Take it easy.